Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Jason Card coming at you here from my home office at JW Cole Financial, joined by, of course, Dean Minuto.
Thank you.
I have to thank
Hold
Melissa.
on. I'm wearing big boy pants for the first time all week. So you guys can't see, but they're down there.
Yeah, well, I'm not, so I'm just going to stay sitting. So that's fine. Here's the thing. This is the Women of Coal meeting. Obviously, you and I both have Y chromosomes, so I appreciate being a guest MC today. Dean, we couldn't just magically create him into a female, but
I would be better if you did. I would be better. Hey, by the way, has anyone talked to them about the differences between the female and the male brain yet? Do you think during this week?
A good opportunity for you to do that today.
Well, let me just say this. I study brain science and shortcuts, and about 10 years ago, a brain scientist wrote an amazing book called The Female Brain. Her name is Dr. Luann Brizendine, and I've been a single dad, guys, for, 16 years. My daughter's 21 now. So when Devin was 6 or 7, this book came out, and for the first time in human history, they documented the differences structurally and functionally between the male and the female brain, and they're so different. A woman's brain, she can use between 8 and 9 sections of her brain for communications purposes. Jason, guess how many sections of the male brain a guy can use for communication purposes? Yeah, you and I can use 2 because we're highly verbal males. The average male uses 1. So let me just put this in perspective for the women of coal. Your brain is 9 times better than the men in your lives at communicating.
Sounds about right.
That's the good news. Now let me tell you the bad news. You need to slow down because you're faster than us. Your brain works way faster than us for communication purposes. What was a huge learning for me. Once I realized that Devin, that's my daughter, I call her Birdie. Once I realized that Birdie's brain was so much faster than I could say, Birdie, you got to slow down. You asked Daddy a question. I'm still trying to figure out the answer, and you're now on the 3rd question. So this is true. Jason, the book is The Female Brain. Let me just grab a marker here. Female Brain, if everyone wants to look it up, by Dr. Luann. Just type L-U and then B-R-I-Z, Luann Brizendine. Type that in on Amazon. It's 350 pages, The Female Brain. It's unbelievable, totally worth it. A few years later, Jason, she wrote a book called The Male Brain. It's got 2 pages and one's a picture.
You see, okay, you're starting off on the right foot. Self-deprecating, it's perfect. Okay, and gang, I hope you understand. This is what you've signed up for right here. If you thought you're going to multitask through this presentation, just forget it. Just stop whatever you're doing, focus on your screen, because Dean is a pedal to the metal guy. We actually found him through one of our other advisors. As most ideas, it was one of the best ideas that came from the field, from one of you.
It was one of the best ideas?
It was the best idea, clearly. Well, since Karen Roberts is on the call and she helped us with coming up with Bomb, I can't say the best idea, but it's a pretty darn good idea.
So I just want to point out there's 7 shortcuts that the brain uses. We're going to talk about all 7 of them today when we get into them. I refer to them as the magnets. And the one that Jason just used in terms of the magnets, let me get this up here, is the middle magnet. Guys, there's shortcuts that your clients use, that your families use to make decisions. And there's 188 of them. I can show you all of them. They're called cognitive biases. But what you need to know is I've spent the last 30 years making these things that are invisible visible for people. And I've summarized them as the 7 magnets. And Jason, I don't know, we'll send out, if you haven't already, we'll make sure that you got enough copies of my book to send out to everyone, and the summary card, we'll make sure that everyone gets this as well. But the one that Jason just used, and what was her name, Karen?
Karen Roberts.
Karen Roberts. So if we are folks far more likely to say yes in any situation with someone we like. And the fastest shortcut we look for is someone who likes us. Understand, when you pay someone a compliment, their brain releases a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is the same chemical that gets released when Keith Richards does heroin. That's why they call dopamine or heroin dope, because dopamine makes you feel really good. Guys, the fastest way for you to connect with someone is to pay them an honest compliment, which is what Jason just did with Karen. All right, brother, go ahead. I'm sorry. I jumped into the content.
No, I'm going to shut up and get out of the way because.
No, come on, don't. Yeah, tell me about how this week has gone so far, and tell me about, as I flip back here through my slides, tell me about what people are taking away from the session so far this week. What was this whole Enneagram thing you were telling me about?
Okay, so that's a good setup, gang. That's a good setup. So what Dean's going to talk about, and he has a couple of days worth of information that he can share. We don't have that much time. We have him for about an hour. But what he has done is pivot a little bit his focus to talk about kind of the new paradigm we find ourselves in. You all have gone through, or most of you have gone through the Enneagram. And a lot of what was talked about by Becky David going through the Enneagram was talking about kind of a snapshot of who you are, as in where you're starting from. This is kind of the place that you're at today. And there was even a couple of factors in there that said, if you would like to change things, here are some things that you can do. Dean's going to talk quite a bit about kind of that, the where we're at today and where we could be going forward. And I love your starting different. It's not starting over, it's starting different as a topic, because it's just an eloquent way to put what we all would really like to think of right now is we're not hitting a reset button, but it's certainly going to be different from now on.
Absolutely. We're never starting over, we're starting different. Every day is a chance to start different. Every interaction with a client, every interaction with our family member, and we are all constantly in a state of becoming. Even companies are constantly in a state of becoming. So this is the sunrise. This was actually yesterday morning as I'm putting together my weekly Starting Different webcast. Starting Different, this is the full view from the first webcast I did out back. So Jason and I aren't far from each other. When my daughter started her junior year, her sophomore year of college, I decided I needed to start different because she wasn't home with me at all anymore. And Jason, I think I've mentioned this to you. I woke up in a big empty house in Westchester, Pennsylvania on a Wednesday. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, and I knew that I had no one to speak to for the next 2 days. And I wept. I wept. I looked in the mirror, tears streaming down my face, and I said, all right, this is not a good look for a motivational speaker. So we got to do something different. So I laid out a plan, and I'm going to talk about that in my new book, but I laid out a plan for where I really wanted to be. And first of all, where was I now? This is your Enneagram. What is? So 3 questions, right? What is? So what? And what's next? So I thought about my current situation, what is, and I thought about the implications of being alone and being up there, and my folks had a place down here, and all I really need is an international airport, because I deliver 150 keynotes and talks a year, and Tampa, pretty amazing place. So I wasn't planning on being sequestered here totally by myself, but that's what happened, and it is what we make of it. So I've decided to create a series of webcasts around this title, and over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've had a number of authors on, and I'm going to have Jason send you guys a link to my website, because on this same page that I have each of these 25, 30-minute videos, there is a video that I did with Jason and with Craig when we first started this process about how in this time of disruption, everything is different. Everything is different for us, for our clients, and when people are in change, difference, it triggers them as danger. Different means danger, and our brain responds to danger unless we're conscious of it by going into fight or flight. So I said, but what if there was a button you could push to turn that stress off? And that was the first person I interviewed, was my friend, you see up top, Dr. Bill Crawford. He has 2 PBS specials, and he teaches a simple 5-step process to eliminate stress. And I could walk you guys through that slide. And then I said, okay, what if there was a button? You see, at this point now I had my artist, Lucia, actually design a button that's a sunrise and a start button. And I said, what if there was a button you could push to be you on your best day? And my second guest is a Hollywood actor, Michael Olaso. He was in the last Pink Panther movie. And he is a master at helping people be their best in front of the camera. He's a director, a producer, and he works with CEOs. And I said, okay, as I started going through my list, I got a buddy who was the top fighter gun pilot in the US Air Force. He was the top F-15, F-22 Raptor pilot, and he became the Top Gun Academy's lead trainer on what the Air Force calls the debrief process. What if there was a button you could push for you and your team to be as continuously excellent as a Top Gun fighter? So that was the third one. Fourth one is a self-made guy, Mr. Bill Wooditch, who's a friend of mine. I just promoted him to Dr. Jason. But Bill built a financial services company, an insurance company, doing $100 million a year in Laguna Beach. And we're talking, so Jason, I say this picture right here is one exit away from paradise, okay? That's St. Pete Beach. Paradise is actually Laguna Beach, okay? But who the hell wants to work that hard, Jason? Okay, well, Bill Wooditch has worked that hard, and there's a Ferrari in the garage, and he wrote an amazing book called Fail More. Fail, and I've turned it into an acronym. Find an important lesson. Fail more. Last week on Friday, Steve Robertson was on. Steve Robertson can teach you how to communicate with the aliens in your home and your office. Generation Z is different than any other generation. So there's a summary there. And then this week, I got Mark Lang, because Mark Lang and I have spent 20 years working together. He has 6,000 employees at Arch Insurance. And we have put together a process that his team can follow every single day to become better every single day. And part of that process, folks, and I'm going to give you the big secret here. If you want to become better at anything, I'm going to give you 2 secrets. Here's the first secret. It's 3 questions. What do the top performers do? Already, what do the top performers do in that process? Everything is a process, folks. Sales is a process. Customer service is a process. Writing a book is a process. Delivering a speech is a process. What do the top performers do? Here's the second question I'm going to have you consider. And if you guys want, take out a big blank sheet of paper and write what, why, and how. So what do the top performers do? Why do those things work? And how can I calibrate them for myself? I don't want to turn myself into someone else as handsome as Jason is. Jason's got his own style. I got my own style, even though we have similar colors on today, and we didn't plan this. You know, if we were the women of Cole, we would have planned this better. I'm just saying. All right, Jason has gone silent on me. That's all right. So what do they do? Why do those things work? And how can I calibrate? But let me give you the big secret, guys. The secret is that high performers make the invisible visible. High-performing salespeople make the steps of their process visible to themselves so that they can follow them with every client. People who understand how to influence and persuade make persuasion concepts visible to themselves so that they can follow them with anyone they're trying to influence and persuade. And an organization can be successful if they identify the behaviors that lead to success, they make them visible, and they follow them every day. See, what I found early on, Jason, and so here's my background, guys. I started out as a high performance sales trainer. My clients included Fortune 10 companies. Mark and I started working together at the Hartford. He had 6 call centers and about 1,000 reps that I helped to make the process of sales visible, because there's things that successful people do sometimes. And at the end of the day, after they're done interacting with a client, they often leave and they go, oh, I could have said this. I should have said this. If I only would have said this, that interaction would have been so much more successful. And I've made it my job to help you guys eliminate the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. So I laid out a process and we identified what top performers did and created a map in that process. So how do you make things visual? So some good news and bad news for us, Jason, because the second thing that I did after studying sales performance is study the human brain. So I got 2 points I want to make about the human brain before we get started for the women of Cole. So first point, everyone you interact with was born with a brain. Everyone on this phone call was born with a brain. Bad news, we were never given a user manual. So I want you guys to think about if you had a user manual, if there were buttons you could push, and I want to give you a term for these buttons. Forcing mechanisms. FM, forcing mechanisms. If you can create forcing mechanisms for your brain, you will be able to achieve any kind of change you want in your life. Let me give you an example of a forcing mechanism. In Florida, the cleaning crew comes to my house Monday mornings at 8 o'clock. That's a forcing mechanism for me. Every Monday morning at 6 a.m., I'm up getting the house ready for the cleaning crew. But if the cleaning crew never came to my house, Jason, when would I be taking the time to organize my house and getting my house straightened out every week? When would that happen?
Maybe by the end of the week?
Never. It would happen never. My house would be destroyed if I didn't have a forcing mechanism once a week that caused me to do that. So scientists actually have names for these forcing mechanisms. They call them stimuli. The stimuli is something in our environment that we react to. But the really interesting thing, guys, is you can turn stimuli into something far more powerful. You can turn it into a cue that then starts routine for you. A cue is a forcing mechanism that starts a routine. My cleaning crew comes at 8. On Sunday night, I'm looking around the house, man. I'm figuring out, okay, I know they'll fold my laundry for me if it's already clean and on that couch, because I have them trained to do that. So I start doing my laundry, and as soon as it's dry, I throw it all on the couch, right? Now, there is a cue, a routine, and if you follow a routine enough, you develop the most powerful thing in human consciousness, a habit. There is nothing more powerful than habits. There is nothing more destructive than habits. The habits you develop will directly lead to the success you have at everything in life, and the habits you have will directly lead to the failures you have at everything in life. And they're either the hardest thing in the world to develop, or they're the easiest thing in the world to develop. Which would you prefer I talk about? What makes them hard or what makes them easy, Jason?
Definitely both, because there's bad ones I need to break and good ones I need to adapt.
Okay, so the first thing is you need to write them down. You need to physically make a list of what are the bad habits you want to break and what are the good habits because you have to start with the end in mind. And information gets to the brain 30 times faster, Jason, through the eyes than through the ears. So I don't want you talking about this stuff. I want you writing it down. When you handwrite stuff, you're actually imprinting your brain. Scientists refer to this as the commitment and consistency principle. And by the way, in my magnets that I showed you guys earlier, that's the M for motion. A thing in motion stays in motion. The fastest way for you to get something in motion is to write it down. You're twice as likely to follow through. You've known this since you were kids. Before you went grocery shopping, your mom or your aunt or your grandma, Jason, they told you to do what before you went grocery shopping?
Write a list.
Yeah, because if you don't have a list, you're not going to remember. Now, here's the cool thing that we now know about writing lists. You don't always even have to take that list out of your pocket. Just the act of writing it down imprinted your brain visually. Okay, so we can go back and forth, but I want you to make a list of those habits. Then what I want you to do with your good habit, with the habits you want to develop, is ask yourself, what can I set up in my environment as a cue that can then spark a routine. Okay, so here's one that I have been following religiously since the COVID-19 and the sequester outbreak happened. I know that I need to drink more water. The goal is 8-ounce glasses a day. I know that in times of stress, I can become, just like everyone here, our brains can become dehydrated. That's bad. Dehydration leads to stress, leads to anxiety. So I needed to create a cue. The cue is physically a marble top table between my living area and my work area. And there are 8 stones and an empty glass on that table. This is the glass, folks. It's going to go back on the table after I finish this glass. There's already 3 stones moved over to the right-hand side of the table, because whenever I drink a glass, I grab a stone and I move it to the right, and then I fill the glass up if all 8 aren't over there. The glass is a cue to spark the routine for me to drink more water. Now, Jason, I'm not saying I drink 8-ounce glasses every day, but I have been averaging 6 every day since this COVID-19 started. And that's a guy, Jason, who used to go from coffee to bourbon with nothing in the middle. Okay? So that's an example of setting up some cues and setting up some routines. But what you need to understand is that you can do the same thing with your bad habits. With each of your bad habits, I want you to begin tracking what it was that sparked that habit to start during the day. What was it? Because that's a cue. That's a cue that sparks routines to happen. And if you don't eliminate the cues that are sparking your bad habits, they will be impossible for you to break. Identify the cues, build a routine around the cues. Jason, how are we doing so far?
Fantastic. This is exactly what I was hoping for.
Yep. We getting good stuff? We getting good stuff here? Okay, so we got a brain.
So real quick, Dean, if anyone wants to ask a question, how do they do that with the GoToWebinar dashboard?
Well, it would. You know what? Let me see here. If anyone, I guess they could send a note. Oh, someone has no sound on their end. Kim has no sound. That's not good. Maybe she got that fixed. But you can hear me, correct, Jason?
Correct.
And I can hear you. So I'm wondering whether I called in and it's a busy signal. No sound here. Okay, we can type here. Yes.
I haven't got any other messages of anyone saying they can't hear anything. So
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You and I are recording this, so they'll certainly be able to hear the recording when we have it set. But yeah, Jason, we would need someone physically managing the whole question and answer thing, and that's not how this one is set up. But you and I could set that up for the next one if you want, for sure.
Perfect.
Okay, but they certainly can email you or me any questions that they want. All right. So Jason, we've covered a couple of things about how the brain works. Now we've covered, and you've seen all of my magnets before. I think, just without people even knowing, I already went through a little bit of motion. I covered a little bit of the N in the NICE card. If I were to cover any others of these, where would you like me to go next? We could lay out some basics here from brain science about how the brain works. We could talk about making a sales process visual. And again, all of this is in my book, and I'll make sure that you have copies. I'll either bring them over to you and you can send them out to people, or if people want to grab it on Amazon, that's up to them. But I'll get them to you, Jason, so you can send them to people if you want for free. Where would you like to go next?
I think we need to talk about those. You're right, in the what's, but also the give, especially nowadays when everyone's trying to think of ways in which they can help, and our advisors are the best helpers that are out there in terms of being able to be the financial quarterback or coach for their clients. So I would say the give card probably makes a whole lot of sense.
So give is the psychological principle that scientists refer to as reciprocity. And it basically says the shortcut that human beings use to decide whether they give something to us is, has this person given us something in the past? Hold on, let me pull up a larger version of the magnets cards so that people might be able to see them easier. Okay, there we go. So this card is actually referred to as reciprocity. And we give back when people give things to us. And I think the most important thing to understand right now is that uncertainty leads to stress. And one of the more powerful things you can give, and I refer to these as the 3 I's, is information. Lack of information, uncertainty, causes stress in people's lives. And if you don't have an answer for someone, they want to know that you're working on it. You know, listen, the brain is looking for shortcuts. The brain is looking for patterns. And there's an industry that for its entire existence has been really focused on giving people shortcuts. And that industry is the military. You know, when lives are at risk, you don't want it to take a long time for people to understand what you're saying. So the military has come up with some really powerful shortcuts. You know, one of the things that the military does is called bottom line up front, or bluff. Don't make people search till the end of a communication for the information you're trying to give them, especially in today's world. Folks have a very short filter in today's world. They're being bombarded with information. They're being bombarded with news. You know, my last guest talked about Generation Z having something called an 8-second filter. 8-second filter. Not an 8-second attention span. Generation Z can pay attention if they want to, but they're extremely good at filtering you either in or out in their stream of information. They are the first generation to grow up in a world of constant change and constant technological, not only change, but full immersion. They've been bombarded with information basically since they were born. They never remember a time without the internet. They never remember a time without an Apple iPhone. And they have become better than us at filtering out information. And there's something that you can learn from them in the military. That is, if you have information to give to people, before you send that out, ask yourself, what is the bottom line? And can I put it up front in the message? So that's the first little tip around give that I'll have you guys think about today in a time of distress. The second little tip I'll have you think about is this thing that you hear in movies that soldiers say to their officers. I got a really good friend who's a retired brigadier general. My friend General Jeff Foley was the head of Cyber Command. I got another good friend, as I told you, that ran the Top Guns debrief program for the Air Force. And you know what soldiers say when a request is made? Hooah! Hooah, Jason. You know what hooah means? Heard, understood, and acknowledged. Chaos, warfare, chaos, COVID-19, that's what we're in. We don't have a lot of time to let people know we've heard them, we understood, and we're on it, okay? I sent in this application to my bank, you know, for as many of us small business owners have, and it went into a void, and I heard nothing back. I did not hear that they received it. I did not hear that they understood if I asked a question. I did not hear any acknowledgement. It just went into a void, okay? And this creates stress. So how can you let people know really quickly, even if you don't have the answers, how can you let them know that you've heard, you understand, and you acknowledge what they've requested? All right, Jason, we've done motion, we've done give, we did a real brief brief. And there's more to talk about on motion. Where would you like to go next, Jason?
Well, honestly, I think what would benefit this group and anyone who was watching this is if you did get a little bit into the three that you listed there at the beginning, including, of course, focusing a little bit on how the brain processes, like you said, visuals 30 times faster. We're all now operating in a webinar or virtual meeting environment, and why would we do that? I mean, what's the point of not just picking up the phone and having a phone conversation, but instead having a face-to-face dialogue digitally? Clearly, we want to make sure that what we say is heard, but we also want to look at each other because why? Seeing is believing, right? I mean, that's the old adage. And you do a really good job of breaking down those, I guess they're cues, but especially getting into the video piece, it just always drove it home for me.
So these are three ancient words: alpha, delta, and video. And what I'll let you know is that we know more now about how the brain works than we've ever known in human history. But the ancients knew this stuff. One of the things that we know, and I'm just going to tell you guys before we get started, everyone in the world, their brain has only two goals every day, only two. The first goal is their survival, them and their kids. That's the brain's first goal. Goal number one, to keep you alive. Goal number two, to use as little energy as possible to achieve goal number one. So understand that everything the brain does is focusing on its own survival and finding shortcuts to do that save time, right? So the first concept, and there's only three things you need to know. There's a part of the brain that actually gets triggered when we make decisions. Here's the human brain. By the way, it's 4 to 5% of our body's mass. I weigh about 200 pounds. By the way, I've lost about 20 pounds, Jason, during this COVID-19 stuff.
That makes one of us. Good job.
I told you I was going to come out of this looking like Craig Tolley. 2 to 3%, 4% around there of our body's mass, but 25% of our body's energy. The brain is constantly firing. And by the way, it's not thinking. The brain is constantly using energy in this part of your brain to keep you alive. Right here, this is the top of your limbic system, the top of your spinal cord. This is the fight or flight brain. And this part of your brain is triggered by three things, and I've summarized them right here. The first thing it's triggered on, alpha. Alpha, first, most important, think of a radio station called WIIFM. The first thing that triggers this part of the brain is any information about me. What's in it for me? Whenever you're interacting with anyone, this is the first question they're asking. What's in it for me? Scientists call this you messaging, but I actually want you to think about, with everyone you're interacting with, how quickly are you getting to the point to let them know what's in it for them? The second thing that triggers this part of the brain is the ancient Greek word delta, as symbolized by a triangle. Delta, meaning change, meaning difference. The brain is constantly scanning the environment to make sure you're safe. So any change in the environment, the brain assumes is a threat. Guys, I'd have you write down three things to consider. The first is delta means difference. The second thing, difference means danger. And the third thing, danger triggers decisions. It's in our brain's best interest to assume that any change in our environment is a saber-toothed tiger, even if it's not. You know, Jason, I told you and Craig on that webinar, how many weeks ago was that, Jason? They're all running together on me. How many weeks ago was our first webinar?
It's been like 5, 6 weeks. It's been a while, yeah.
So to your credit, you were one of my first clients to ask me to do a webinar for your team because you understood that we were in a time of massive change and there were things that we could remind people of that would help them during that time. In fact, that video already has, I think, over 800 views, the video of the webcast, and we'll make sure that people get the link to the page. But the J.W. Cole, the 5 Brain Essentials webcast, has about 800 views. And I shared with you and Craig, Jason, that a day or two before I was doing webinars for my largest client, Arch Insurance, has 6,000 employees. And I had a webinar scheduled and at noon. And at 10 a.m., I was walking my neighborhood, the neighborhood I've lived in for a year now here in Florida. I've walked this neighborhood almost every day when I'm home, guys. I got lost in my own neighborhood. And I freaked out. My brain went into fight or flight. I said, I don't know where I am. I got to get back. As if there was a saber-toothed tiger chasing me in the neighborhood, but there wasn't. So there's a 5-step process you guys can follow when you feel your time and stress. And I can share that with you a little later, Jason, if you want me to. But what I primarily want you to do is when you're interacting with anyone, I want you to ask yourself this question. What's at risk for them? Do they see me as danger, or do they see me as safe? To the degree you can identify what's at risk and remove that risk for people, you will help them get out of this fight or flight part of their brain and start thinking rationally. Okay, so alpha, everyone focuses on themselves. We've covered that. Delta, everyone pays attention to changes in the environment. We've covered that. Let's cover this third word, video. Yeah, I know we pronounce it video, but that's not how the word was originally pronounced. Jason, if you look it up in a Latin dictionary, it's video, and that word is 3,000 years old. It's an ancient verb that means to see and to understand, because the ancient Latins equated seeing with understanding. Jason, I'm sure you when you were a kid, you said to your dad when he asked you for something, I see what you want. Did you ever recall saying that to your dad, Jason?
Oh yeah, yep.
So what we're saying when we say I see, and I'm just going to draw a little I over here, what we're saying when we say I see is I understand. Here's what you need to understand about anyone's brain. There's only 5 ways for you to get information into this person's brain. There are 5 senses. Those are the only channels by which the brain accepts information from the outside world. And they are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, and the skin. Of the 5, 1 is the king. The eyes. Information gets to the brain 30 times faster. 30 times, I'm going to write it on the screen, 30 times faster through the eyes than through the ears. So never say it to them if you can show it to them. Guys, how can you make your messages visual to people? How can you show people? And you just need to understand that 90% of all brain energy is not devoted to thinking. 90% of all brain energy is applied to processing visual stimuli. That's how important your eyes are for keeping you alive. Okay, so Jason, I've covered those 3, and I think that kind of gives us kind of a nice background on the 7 magnets. We've covered motion, some of give, some of nice. Where would you like me to go next, Jason?
I think everyone right now is looking for trust. If you think about the environment that we find ourselves in, and even going forward as we are reopening economies and states are trying to grapple with business as usual, business as unusual going forward, how do they make sure that their citizens trust that they're safe? How do we each keep our families safe? It feels like that goes hand in hand with trust.
Yeah. So there's 3 shortcuts that people use to decide whether they're going to trust someone. And there is a continuum. It's called a continuum of trust that one of my friends, he is a Dutch scientist, talks about. It's a continuum between informal sources of trust and formal sources of trust. And what we've been seeing for the last 15 years is that, especially Generation Z, they have been moving towards the informal sources of trust. So influencers on the internet, their peers, etc. But what Timon is suggesting he's seeing now, and with research that very, very large corporations are doing around the world, is there is a shift in this continuum where Generation Z and all of us are now shifting back to trusting more formal sources of information. Dr. Fauci, Governor Cuomo, there is a shift. And we're asking ourselves, is this person qualified to give us information? There's such a flood of misleading information. What am I seeing? And the shortcuts to trust have been things like uniforms, diplomas, titles. So I've been talking about this concept of shortcuts to trust for, almost 25 years, since I first started consolidating these three things when I was reading the behavioral psychology. But people look at what they see to decide whether they can trust you. The story that I tell is about the most famous unsolved crime in American history. It was the theft of 14 paintings worth $1 billion from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum on St. Patrick's Day, just outside of Boston in 1990. And Jason, you've heard me tell the story, but two thieves rang the doorbell at 2 a.m. and through the glass told the guard to shut off the alarm and let them in. The guard shut off the alarm and let them in. Jason, what were the two thieves wearing?
Uniforms.
Uniforms of Boston police officers. Because a uniform is a shortcut for us. Now, folks, what you need to understand when I'm talking about uniform, I'm talking about is how all of your stuff shows up. I'm talking about your handouts. I'm talking about what you're wearing. I'm talking about what you drive. Since this is the women of coal, I probably don't need to tell you folks as much as I would the men of coal that we pass judgment on people very quickly based on what we see. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It is. Okay, so think about how your stuff is dressed up during this time. How is your stuff packaged? How are you yourself packaged? I'm not a big fan of those folks who come on webinars in beards. I don't get it. I don't get it. I think it's sending the wrong message. Yes, it's saying we have something in common. Yeah, okay, so I understand that. We're all going through this. But I don't know that that's sending the right message, at least for me. I want you folks to see me as someone who, is organized and put together. And, the eyebrows are getting a little crazy. And there's a lot of gel up here, Jason. There's a lot of gel. I just want you to know this is a whole thing.
Yeah, same.
That's a thing that's happening. And, okay, but how your stuff shows. What? Say it again, Jay.
I said you're not wearing a hoodie though.
I am not wearing a hoodie. Okay. Second thing I'll have you know is we also, when we walk into a doctor's office, we look up on the wall, and what are we looking for? What are we looking for, Jay? We're looking for a diploma. One of the things that I teach to my clients is how you put together your 3D diploma. A 3D diploma is, what do you do? Who have you done it for? And can you demonstrate for me the results they got from you? So you actually can put together a 3D, something you can talk to them about, and things you can show them. Yes, a degree from Harvard is pretty impressive, but so is someone who walks in with the ability to very quickly communicate these three things. What do you do? Who have you done it for? And can you demonstrate the results to me? We also look to titles as a shortcut. You know, I talk about, and Jason knows this about me, and some of the folks on the call who have maybe heard me talk before know this about me. I started going blind when I was 17, and when I was 29, both my eyes came apart. I was actually blind for 6 months, had more than 30 eye procedures. And a few years ago, I had to go back in to have a surgery done, and we've got this all straightened out now. Thank you, Lord. But I have 20/20 vision for the first time in my life. But leading up to this, I had to go to the Wills Eye Institute in Philadelphia, the #1 ranked eye institute in the world, to meet with a surgeon. And as I walked in, there was a banner, and I've shown it in my presentations. And that banner said, Wills Eye Institute, world's first, world's best, US News and World Report, #1 ranked ophthalmology department in America. That's a title. That's a third-party endorsement. So these are the shortcuts we look for, folks. And these are ways that on that continuum between informal and formal, we can now sway people's thinking, because during times of change, during times of distress, they're looking, as Jason said, very much for people they can trust. I'll share with you one other thing. One very important concept. The 3 words, I don't know. We trust people more when they admit to not knowing. We trust people more when they admit to a mistake. So I could go deep into the research here, but I trust a surgeon more who says, Dean, I'm a cataract specialist and I don't know what's going on with the glaucoma, but I have the #1 glaucoma guy in the world, 1 office away from me. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to bring him in. We trust people more when they tell us where the limits of their expertise are. We don't trust people who tell us they're a genius about everything. Not possible. And you know it's not possible. All right, Jay, where do you want to go next? By the way, good stuff. Is this cool? Are you getting what you need, Jason?
This is exactly what I was hoping for. This is fantastic. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that you're sharing now. Again, when you talk about, we're not starting over, we're starting different. And some of the directions that you're going there with presentations like this nowadays, as again, people are kind of coming out of the abnormal, the aberrant, if you will, and trying to get into some semblance of normal going forward. It feels like everyone's behaviors, everyone's daily routine is different today than it was 6 weeks ago. And they're going to go to a daily routine 3 or 4 weeks from now that may or may not be exactly what it was 2 months prior to that. So how to get there?
Well, the biggest tip that I'll share with you is actually from a gentleman who I love dearly. He's had 2 PBS specials. He is the author of 7 books. His name is Dr. Bill Crawford. He's become a dear friend because he taught me a model. And guys, I'm going to teach it to you right now. I want you to write this word, brain, B-R-A-I-N. I want you to write this word down, top to bottom on a sheet of paper, just like this. And then we're going to cover each one of these words because Dr. Bill has done something that I love. What I do, what I have to do with most authors, and I didn't have to do it with Bill, is I have to dive into their content and find deep dive to the bottom of their ocean. And I find pearls that I come back to the surface with and I share with people. And those pearls are often in the form of acronyms or models that I help people put together. And Bill Crawford came up with the brain model, which I now can use in less than 8 seconds to relax, to chill out. I've taught it to everyone I love. Birdie, my daughter, at times, as most kids in Generation Z, suffers from a terrible anxiety. First generation folks, that's always been at war They don't remember a time before 9/11. First generation that almost weekly has seen schools like theirs experience school shootings. First generation that saw their parents go through 2008 and in some cases lose everything. Even though they're living in the safest world in the history of the world and the safest and richest nation in the history of that world, these kids have more anxiety than anyone else. And it's not because they're weak, it's because they see the world for what it is. Dr. Bill teaches this to kids. I taught it to my kid. Dr. Bill had 2 Skype calls with my daughter to help her understand this model. So here's what goes on when we freak out. When we freak out, we go into fight or flight. And that releases very bad chemicals, fight or flight chemicals, cortisol, all the stuff that happens when a saber-toothed tiger is chasing us. And the way we can stop those chemicals immediately is by doing these 3 things right here. First, Jason, I want you to do this with me. I want you to breathe in and count to 4. Hold it for a count of 4. Now exhale. 4, 4, 4 breath. By the way, this is what they teach the Navy SEALs when something goes wrong underwater. They teach them, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, because you've now sent a message to the subconscious part of your brain that you are now taking over something that it thought it was in charge of. So it's now paying attention. The robot that you have in your brain is now looking for you to send it some code to work on. So on this breath, Jason, breathe in again, 4 counts. Hold it for 4. And on the exhale, I want you to say the word relax, Jason. Say it out loud.
Relax.
I want you to say it like this. Relax.
We do it again.
I want you to do it again. Breathe in, hold it for 4, breathe out, and say it.
Relax.
Now your brain is given a message. In that moment, I want you to ask yourself this question. What do I want to be feeling right now? I now want you to imagine a time in your life you felt that way. And in that moment, you will notice that you have changed your chemicals. We can get ourselves to relax within 8 seconds by following this model. So yes, everything's changed and change is going to cause stress. Relax. Ask yourself, what do you want to be feeling? I'm going to share with you, Dr. Bill actually teaches 3 or 4 really powerful questions. And I'm going to give you the most powerful question. If the person you love the most was in the situation you're in right now, what would you tell them to do? That question changed my life. Person I love the most in the world is my daughter. I had never thought to treat myself as if I was someone I loved. And when you start treating yourself like someone you love, everything changes. Because there's stuff you would not allow your kid to feel, go through. And if you don't have a kid, pick the person in the world you love the most. There's stuff you would not want them to choose to feel about themselves. And we are choosing to feel that way every day. And it's a choice. Choose differently. Choose better. By the way, this is, let me take this screen down, or take the highlights down. And Jason, if this is something that, you know, folks would find of value, if they send you an email, I'll send you a copy of this slide if they want to print it out and put it up in their office or teach it to someone that they love. So Jason, I think we're at the 56-minute mark on our hour. What do you think, brother? How'd we do today? What else would you like to cover? What else would you like to cover? What else would you like to cover that we haven't covered yet?
Well, let me ask you, do you have the ability to put those asks in there?
Yes, I do.
Is that something that we could, just to round that part out? I'm curious now myself. It's now
the challenge
a question
is
mark
this.
in my brain.
the challenge is this: if we did that, then all of this would all be filled in. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me show you the book that this is outlined in if you guys want to get all the questions in the detail. It's Dr. Bill Crawford's book, Life at the Top of the Mind. Hold on, let me go back to the interview. And by the way, the video where he shares with you those questions is on my website.
Oh, there you go.
It's,
Well, we'll make
it's
sure
the
to follow
video.
up with
It's Dean's starting different interview with Dr. Bill Crawford, and the book is Life at the Top of the Mind. Here, I'll show you a picture of Dr. Bill's book. This is the one right here. If anyone wanted to get that book, he's unbelievable and just a sweetheart.
Fantastic.
All right, Jason, I have one slide that I end my presentations with. Is there anything that you would like to cover before I close up and turn the recording down?
Nope. This has been exactly what we were hoping for, Dean. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And again, we are now the token males of the Women of Coal, and I think pretty sure we get a badge that'll be coming in the mail.
All right.
We'll follow up with everyone with your website and some of these resources, and I will chat with Craig about making available the books.
Easy, however you want to do it. So this is my favorite visual, guys, and I see it differently now than I did 20 years ago when I bought this statue. But the statue is by a woman named Bobby Carlyle, who's become a friend of mine. The statue is called Self-Made Man. And Bobby created a work of art where this person is actually carving themselves out of a block of granite. But I see it a little differently now. I see this person as revealing themselves to us. I'm sure you guys have seen during this crisis, people revealing their true nature to you. You know, good times and bad times both have a tendency to bring out who we really are. There were people that I thought were jerks, Jason. They're absolutely jerks. There's people I thought were good folks, like you guys at JW Cole, and you have proven to me that you are good folks. We are constantly in a state of becoming. So I'll leave you guys with this thought. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but it was what we made of it. Folks, you're never starting over, you're always starting different. Jason, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. And I'm going to end the recording in 3, 2, and 1.